I told my goal race, you talk about your goal race, and then you tell us your goal race.
Ready?
Yeah.
Action.
Hey everyone, we're here today to talk to you about planning your race season, how often to race, and our race calendars.
Grab your coffee and let's dive in. Alright, so we're going to talk about race planning for the spring. This is a time of year where lots of registrations start to open and people start to think about what they want the next year to look like before all those races maybe even sell out.
Yeah.
So yeah, what have you been thinking? What have you been looking at?
I've been looking at a few. Capra was one that I did initially. That was my first trail race ever.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that 2 years?
I think it was 2 years ago.
2018,
yeah.
I guess, yeah.
12k, and wrecked my legs. Had no idea what
Couldn't walk after.
Had no idea what I was doing. So that's kind of one that I'd like to go back to and try and see, and just knowing what I've done now.
So they're kind of setting up like an early spring race that's a distance that you're kind of comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then why don't you share like what you asked me the other night when we were kind of talking about this video? Because I think that's a really
how
good
often should you have a race? To me, I was thinking like you do one a month.
Yeah. The question was, should I race once a month?
And not a big one. You know, you do a 12k
yeah.
once a month or something like that. There's one staggered every month here in BC anyhow.
Mm-hmm. So when we were talking about that, the conversation went, should I race once a month? No. Really? No. Or yes. I don't know what I said. I can't remember. But no, you shouldn't. And it went on. So basically, even with short distances, we're talking about having one race a month being like probably too many when you think of just training and building and working on different areas of fitness. Short distances are super fun, but you still have to go out there and like be ready to kind of, you know, give it that effort. And then you also just kind of miss a lot of those easy runs when you're doing races that often, whether it's between that actual race day becoming a high effort or maybe the next day resting instead of running. Mm-hmm. So it kind of depends what your overall goals are, but we talked about it maybe looking at it up to every 6 weeks. So that you get like every month and a half, if there's a fun distance that like seems exciting, then that would kind of be like, I would say more reasonable. Yeah. Even before, like it depends on the athlete, but I find if you're gearing up to a big goal race over summer, racing every 6 weeks in winter can be fun, but for some people it can be a lot. So you also don't have to. Like some people want 3 months where they don't race. Yeah, that adds up to a lot, especially if you're trying to train between, you're trying to have fun and enjoy the summer. Or have other hobbies, or family trips away. That does take up a lot of time. Yeah. So then 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks kind of. Yeah. So I figure if you're doing 6 weeks, there isn't necessarily a race every 6 weeks. No. So it's probably more so like 8 weeks that you'd be doing it if you were going to stagger races. Yeah, so it's flexible, of course. Like again, you don't have to race every 6 weeks, but it can, for people who want to get those short distances in, that can be like a really fun kind of spread to have. And then it also, like when, you know, those rainy, dark days are happening, like they are here right now, it's dark at 4 p.m. That can be really helpful to get out because there's a date that's relatively near. Right. Like, oh, if I can't, you know, miss this week or this run or this workout because I want to use that fitness in just a few weeks. Yeah. So have something early winter or something. I guess early New Year, like January, February, if there's a race. Yeah. And then from there, I guess you'd pick like a goal race is ideally what you want to do. Yeah. And then plan a race before that, 8 weeks before, and then. Yeah. So roughly, again, depending on the distance. So yeah, we kind of went like how to plan out winter and what to think about just in terms of short races and their frequency. But then like what you actually want to do when you're looking at the whole year is have your goal races. So let's say, Matt, you did your first 21k, that was actually 23 on the trails as trail races go. My own course. Yeah, that was you. But you did that this year, so you might decide whether you want, like, I think you'll be doing that one again in June. Definitely, yeah. I think that'll be my goal race this year, is to try and go out and crush it. It was fun, and I was capable and did it, but I noticed the last few K, my legs were giving me troubles. Basically the same troubles they were on the first 12K I ever did. Yeah. So I know what my weaknesses are and what I need to work on. So to have that as a goal race in June, it gives me a lot of time to
do a race before then and train and get a feel for my body and figure it out. And train like consistently.
Do all those fun things. So if you're doing like 21k in June, that could, like, again, that race, this could be the same plan if you're doing like a 21 or a 50k or a 30k or just something in between. But then you kind of, you want to have that preparatory race. You don't need to race that distance. With shorter distances and consistent training over time, you can start to do that. Like, you can have more than one 21k for sure within a year, right? But you don't need to run a 21k trail race prior to doing your goal race.
Right.
So 12Ks, 16Ks if they're available. Again, like those 10-mile distances would be awesome. And you want to have one, like you said, kind of that with that distance, again, 6 weeks before would probably be okay, because that's lots of recovery time. Again, in a 21K, you actually can do shorter, like, just because it's not as much distance, you can actually build to it depending on where you're starting from, but more safely and more quickly. So you might, like, some people might actually run close to the 21K, not the full distance, but in like the 2 or 3 weeks before. But to race it, again, if you have all that time, like from now in, what are we in, November until June, you, with where you're at, you could more than safely build to do that distance in advance, or really practice with like getting comfortable with that 18K range. And then if you didn't want to be running the volume, to do 21, but
so building up in training just to get to like an 18K training day.
Yeah, for that to be like pretty normal. Yeah. And then really working on speed alongside that, so that you get more comfortable running faster for longer. And that's really what, when you're building up to 21K and you have months to do that, that's really what you start to get to play with. Versus if you're like, hey, in 6 weeks I'm going to do 21K, it'd be more about safely building your distances and your tolerances to that. And your like
and just
capacity for that.
To do the full distance, as opposed to having a lot of training, and you can do the speed, the distance, and kind of get your body in sync with everything.
Yeah, you can start to like work on the speed in different ways, and power, right, for those hills in that course, and start to actually like play with that a bit more. Versus when you have less time, you're kind of going to check those boxes, but you're going to get to like check them once, right? Versus if you get like a full, like if you plan out your year that way, and you have this coming up in June, you can actually spend, a month on certain kind of different types of training or different types of workouts and progress those, rather than just kind of like tuning them in, here and there, and then doing the race. So the more time you have, the better. But anyway, so you develop to that 21, you could do kind of lots of different things depending on the time and obviously your current fitness. If that was like per se a 50K that you were training to do, maybe. You're cursed.
Definitely thought about it.
But if it was a 50K, then you'd want a 21K, like you said, in that kind of 6 weeks kind of before.
A race.
I would say. Again, with that distance, you don't have to. The area where I would say something different, and actually just had like a good conversation on this the other day with an athlete, is like, if you're training to do 100K or 100 milers, then I'd never send somebody out and be like, oh, you need to go do a 50K training day or a 50-mile training day. If there's a race, then you could use that for it, because it takes out so much more of the extra planning. Like, you have aid stations, you have a map course, all those things. Yeah. So anyway, so
a big distance like that, it'd be good to do the race like way before your goal race, just because
a shorter distance.
A shorter distance before your big distance, but do it as a race. When it's in the 50K plus range.
So if you have the 50K, you want to have like that 25K race beforehand, probably, most people. But in a 25K, you could probably do in training solo. As soon as you're doing like a 50-mile, let's say, or a 100-mile, you might want a 50K, right, well in advance. And again, depending on the person, that might be something that those are spread out, throughout the year, with like big breaks and like gaps kind of in between to work on different things, or just to have downtime. Other people might want that 50K 6 weeks before the 50-mile, right? Like, just so it's really a tune-up race, and you actually do that race within your peak training. But that's when you know that you kind of know your recovery zones, and
and not necessarily go there and race it either.
And depending on the athlete, different levels, right? So some people would use it purely as a training day. It's a day to like practice your fueling, check that your shoes are going to feel good for that distance, your gear, build that confidence towards that distance. But for other athletes, it might be a good time to practice racing hard, and then, kind of building that confidence and fueling at higher effort. So it really depends on what the overall goals are. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then, so you have, your shorter races, like for you, talk about not racing obviously quite as frequently as every month. And then depending on your distance, how you build that out. So I guess the other part would be depending on the distance goals. not, like you mentioned with racing every month, not over racing.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes out, like if you're like, hey, I think I want to do 100 miler, right? And then you're like, I also want to do these 2 or 3 100Ks.
Yeah.
And I think after the 100 miler, I really want to do this 50K that's 6 weeks later. Like I think sometimes we can also get really caught up on all the fun things.
Yeah. For sure. And I was looking through the list of races. I was like, well, I'll do that one. I'll do that one. I'll do that one.
Yeah, like even the shorter distances. I can race every month.
I had a race every 4 weeks that I had thought about, and I was like,
yeah.
And then obviously I had the conversation with you. Oh, it's not a good idea.
It's just, again, some people might like it. Like there are the series that occur roughly every month. And like that can be okay, but those probably won't be your goal races.
No.
Or, like if it gets you out, for some people, right, like that's a place where you can run and feel safe because there's other people out. It's a flagged course, you don't have to navigate. Yeah. And in those cases, sure, but like when I talk about racing, I mean like actually showing up to throw down or like pushing yourself, and then
which is the goal.
Like if that is for you, right? Then every month is probably too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. To take away from your other training or your recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So if we're doing Bear in June.
The 21K.
Yeah. So March, April, May, June. So even March, but cap pressure. That's still a few months out.
Oh yeah. And again, at that distance, if you're consistently training up to then, like if you're not waiting until 6 weeks before and then like, hey, I should probably start running. Yeah. Right. Like if you're training consistently up till then, you could probably, like you could decide if you want to do a different 21K beforehand, or you want to do even like prior to cap pressure in March, if you want to throw like a road 10K, you know, or like that thing that you've never even done or thought about doing, like a road race.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them just to see what's around.
Yeah, you could throw in something like that to work on again that speed before kind of taking it to the trails and adding into the hills. Yeah. And then between March, because you have April, May. Right, like you could probably do one of either shorter race in there if you wanted, or again depending on what your schedule and stuff looks like, just work on building that endurance. Yeah, for the 21K, I can definitely do longer days on my own and run the trails around here and stuff. I don't have to do that race day beforehand or whatever. No, yeah. So I think that's kind of what I look at, and then from there you get to build out your training program. Yeah. The other part we don't talk about is like I don't actually coach you. No. Right. It's more of like you kind of get the things here and there. I get the tips. And stuff like go running, do some strides. Yeah. So I'm kind of on my own right now, just feeling what feels good for me, and getting the tips from you. But yeah, I guess maybe we'll figure out a training plan at some point when we get that 50. Again, you heard it here first today over coffee. Matt's going to do 50K. Matt's going to run a training plan. All right. I think that'll be like a 2023 goal. Okay. 2022, we'll go run. Crush some 21Ks or something. Yeah. I mean, anybody can have a coach at any distance. It's more about like if you want that structure, if you want to live with your coach. I mean, I already do kind of live with the coach. But it obviously it just has to be fun first and make sense for what you want to do. And you do, like right now you're doing the Capra 30x30, like you do a good job with getting out. It's not running every day, it's a run walk thing. It's definitely a good push though, to get out every day. And there's definitely some days I come home from work and come home late, and by the time I go outside and run and come home for dinner, it's getting late, but you gotta just... He comes home to make dinner, let's be clear. You made it sound so nice. Like that's not how it goes. Come home to make dinner. And it can be tough getting out sometimes. So I think maybe it helps show you, like when you're looking at your race plans, it shows you where you have that time or where you could have that time if that's what you chose to do with it, right? Like there's obviously other things maybe you haven't gotten out to do because of like dedicating that time to the Capra 30x30, right? Of getting out every day, but it shows you like, oh, okay, this is maybe what it would look like, and if I only have to do that 4 or 5 days a week, okay, right? It kind of gets you a feel for it. Yeah. Anyways. So those are the race plans. We'll see where they end up. Mark your calendar for registration dates because some of them will sell out. Yeah, I noticed a lot of them opening like December and stuff like that. So and we can link their websites for the local races. Yeah, we'll put up a list of stuff. What's your goal race for next year? Oh, this isn't about me. No, this is about all of us. I told my goal race, you talked about your goal race, and then you tell us your goal race. I have to. So my calendar right now, I guess, looks like. Over winter I'll have some speed development, so I'll do a 5K, 10K, like road, fun, fast stuff, fun we'll call it, I don't know. And then in February I'm going to do the Vancouver first half marathon, registered for that, so that will be fun, that's a road half marathon. And then here comes Aria to join in, and then in March I'm hoping to do the Chuckanut 50K, which again is kind of building. That's about 6 weeks before my goal race of Canyons, 100k, which is a goal race to hopefully lead to another goal race.
It's gonna be a fun one.
Hopefully Western States, but that's a big, big, exciting, scary goal.
Nice.
So,
we'll see where that gets us.
Yeah, maybe we'll be uploading videos from California while we go there to train and practice.
All right.
Fun things ahead.
Yeah.
Yay.
Cool.
Okay, bye.
Talk to you later.
Coffee with Aria. Coffee with